The bathroom was spotless, too spotless, and that's what gave them away. 7 months after 6-year-old Lily Sullivan and her 4-year-old brother Jack vanished from their rural Nova Scotia home, a forensic team stood in the darkness of that second-floor bathroom. The room looked innocent, normal. A family bathroom with children's bath toys still sitting in a basket by the tub. Toothbrushes lined up by the sink, towels folded neatly on the rack. But appearances lie when someone's trying to conceal what happened. The lead forensic specialist raised the luminol sprayer. One press of the trigger. The chemical mist settled over the tiles, the walls, the floor. Then ultraviolet light cut through the darkness, and the room lit up in fluorescent blue. Glowing streaks across the floor. Traces on the bathtub, residue on the sink, a pattern on the wall 3 feet from the ground, exactly the height of a 6-year-old child. What they found wasn't just biological evidence, it was a blueprint of guilt. This is the evidence that could finally answer the question that's haunted investigators, devastated a community, and gripped a nation. What really happened to Lily and Jack Sullivan that night? Before we reveal what investigators found, drop a comment right now. Where are you watching from? Let's build this community together. When Royal Canadian Mounted Police first processed the Sullivan home on May 2nd, 2025, the day Lily and Jack were reported missing, they walked through every room with careful precision. They photographed everything, documented everything, searched for any sign of where 2 children could have gone. The second-floor bathroom got the same treatment as every other room in that house. Officers looked around, checked the surfaces, opened cabinets, examined the space with their eyes and their standard-issue flashlights. Everything looked completely normal. The bathtub was clean. A rubber duck and a few plastic boats sat in a small basket near the faucet, the kind of toys you'd find in any home with young children. 2 small toothbrushes, one pink, one blue, stood in a holder by the sink. Towels hung on the rack. A bath mat lay neatly on the floor. There was no visible evidence of struggle. No overturned furniture, no broken items. Nothing that would make an officer stop and think, something happened here. The bathroom looked exactly like what it was supposed to be. A space where 2 young children brushed their teeth, took their baths, and went through their nightly routines. But 7 months later, forensic specialists returned to that same bathroom with equipment the initial responding officers didn't have. They came with luminol, a chemical compound that's been used in criminal investigations for decades. When luminol is sprayed on surfaces and exposed to ultraviolet light in complete darkness, it reacts with iron in hemoglobin. It creates a distinctive blue-green fluorescence that reveals what the human eye cannot see. It reveals biological evidence even after it's been scrubbed away, even after it's been diluted beyond visibility, even after months have passed. The forensic team sealed the bathroom. They covered the windows to block out every trace of natural light. They set up their cameras and documentation equipment. Then they began spraying luminol methodically across every surface, the floor, the walls, the bathtub, the sink, the toilet. And then they turned on the ultraviolet light. The room transformed. Glowing traces appeared on the tile floor near the bathtub. More traces lit up along the side of the tub itself. The sink showed fluorescent residue, but the most significant finding was on the wall adjacent to the bathtub, a distinct pattern approximately 3 feet from the floor. 3 feet, the exact height of a 6-year-old child. The forensic team photographed everything. They documented the size, shape, and location of every glowing trace. They took samples from each area for laboratory analysis. This wasn't a quick process. This was meticulous, painstaking work that took hours to complete properly. But they knew what they were looking at. The pattern told a story. The samples went to specialized laboratories that handle the most sensitive forensic work for law enforcement agencies across Canada. DNA analysis takes time, especially when samples have been degraded by cleaning agents designed to break down biological material. But the scientists working this case were determined to get answers. Weeks later, the results came back. The biological evidence found in multiple locations throughout that bathroom belonged to Lily Sullivan. The DNA match was confirmed through comparison with Lily's toothbrush and other personal items. There was no doubt, no margin of error. Lily had been in that bathroom. She had been injured seriously enough to leave biological evidence on multiple surfaces in different areas of the room. And then someone had cleaned it up, scrubbed it away using powerful chemical agents in a deliberate attempt to erase what had occurred. But the forensic team didn't stop with the visible surfaces. They removed the drain trap from under the bathroom sink, that curved section of pipe designed to hold water and prevent sewer gases from entering the home. It also traps material that goes down the drain, material that can't easily be flushed away. Inside that trap, they found biological material containing Lily's DNA. They also found something else, cleaning chemical residues in concentrations far higher than you'd ever see from normal bathroom cleaning. Someone had poured industrial-strength cleaning chemicals directly down that drain, not diluted, not mixed with water for regular cleaning, poured straight from the bottle in concentrations meant to break down and flush away biological evidence. The bathtub drain told the same story. More biological material, more chemical residues at concentrations that indicated a deliberate cleanup operation. The forensic team even examined the ventilation system. The bathroom had an exhaust fan in the ceiling standard in modern bathrooms to remove moisture and odors. That fan vents through ductwork that runs through the walls and ceiling before exiting outside. They removed sections of that ductwork and examined them under laboratory conditions. Inside, they found microscopic particles that had been pulled into the vent system during whatever occurred in that bathroom. Particles that were completely beyond the reach of any cleanup effort because they were trapped inside the ventilation system where no one could access them without removing the ducts entirely. More evidence, more confirmation, based on multiple sources, electronic device data, smart home systems, and witness statements, investigators established a timeline. The incident in that bathroom occurred sometime between 8 and 10 p.m. on the evening of May 1st, 2025. The children's tablets showed their last activity around 7:30 to 8 p.m. After that, nothing. Smart home devices registered a spike in noise from the hallway near the children's rooms at approximately 9:45 p.m. And the next morning, Daniel Maleia and Maleia Brooks-Murray called 911 to report that Lily and Jack had wandered into the woods and disappeared. But here's what makes this evidence absolutely devastating. If Lily was injured seriously enough to leave biological evidence in multiple locations throughout that bathroom on the evening of May 1st, if the pattern and distribution suggested trauma significant enough to require immediate medical attention, then she could not have been alive and playing outside the next morning. She couldn't have wandered into the woods. The entire story Daniel and Maleia told was a lie. If you want every update as this case moves toward justice, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Smash that like button. It helps us reach more people who care about Lily and Jack. Now, let's talk about who these children really were. Before we go any further into the evidence, the investigation, and the lies that were told, we need to talk about who Lily and Jack Sullivan actually were, because they weren't just names in a case file. They weren't just subjects of a criminal investigation. They were real children with real personalities, real dreams, real futures that should have stretched decades ahead of them. Lily Sullivan was 6 years old. She had just finished kindergarten and was looking forward to first grade. Her teachers at the local elementary school described her as bright, creative, and genuinely kind-hearted. She loved art, absolutely loved it. She would spend hours with crayons, markers, colored pencils, creating pictures that she'd proudly show to anyone who'd look. Her classroom walls were covered with her drawings, rainbows, flowers, her family, her little brother. She drew the world the way she saw it, colorful, hopeful, full of possibility. She was the kind of kid who volunteered to help her teachers with classroom tasks. She'd offer to help classmates who were struggling with assignments. She had that natural empathy that some children just seem to be born with, the ability to notice when someone else needed help, and the genuine desire to provide it. Her teachers said she was outgoing, social. She had friends. She laughed easily. She participated enthusiastically in class activities, always raising her hand, always eager to share her thoughts. That was Lily. That was who she was supposed to be. Jack Sullivan was 4 years old. He was energetic in the way that 4-year-old boys often are, constantly moving, constantly exploring, constantly asking questions about how things work. He was fascinated by trucks and construction equipment. He could identify different types of heavy machinery with impressive accuracy for a child his age. Dump trucks, excavators, bulldozers, front-end loaders. He knew them all. If there was a construction site anywhere near where the family was driving, Jack would press his face against the car window to watch the equipment work. He'd stand at the fence of construction sites for as long as adults would let him, completely mesmerized by the machines moving earth and materials. He had an infectious laugh, the kind of laugh that made everyone around him smile. People who knew Jack, his teachers at preschool, neighbors, family members, they all remember that laugh. They remember how it would echo across the playground, how it could lighten any mood. These were real children, children who brought joy to the people around them, children who deserved to grow up, go to school, make friends, have experiences, build lives. They lived with their mother, Maleia Brooks Murray, who was in her late 20s, and her partner, Daniel Maleia, who was in his early 30s. The family also included a baby daughter named Meadow, who was about 1 year old at the time Lily and Jack disappeared. Daniel Maleia was not Lily and Jack's biological father. Their biological father was a man named Cody Sullivan, but Cody's parental rights had been terminated through court proceedings several years earlier due to serious concerns about his fitness as a parent. He had no custody, no visitation rights, no legal connection to the children anymore. For all practical purposes, Daniel had become the only father figure Lily and Jack knew in their daily lives. The family lived on a property in Lansdowne Station, a small, rural community in Pictou County, Nova Scotia. For those unfamiliar with the geography, Pictou County is in the northern part of mainland Nova Scotia, along the Northumberland Strait. Lansdowne Station is particularly rural, with properties spread out and surrounded by dense forest and wilderness. The Sullivan property was isolated even by rural standards. The house sat on land surrounded on most sides by thick woods. Behind the property, a gate opened onto trails that led deep into the wilderness, miles and miles of forest, where even experienced hikers can get disoriented. This geographical isolation becomes critically important later. It's central to the story Daniel and Maleia told about what happened to the children. There was another person living on the property, Daniel's mother, Janie Mackenzie. She lived in a separate, smaller building on the same land. She had her own space, her own life, but she was close enough to observe activities at the main house, close enough to hear things, close enough to notice things, close enough to become a witness, though she didn't realize the significance of what she was witnessing at the time. This was the family structure. This was the setting. An isolated rural property, a blended family under significant stress, 2 young children who should have been protected, and a bathroom where something terrible happened on the night of May 1st, 2025. What's the weather like where you are right now? Type it in the comments. I love hearing from you. Looking back now, with the clarity that hindsight provides, the warning signs were everywhere. They were visible to teachers, to neighbors, to anyone paying close attention. But like so many tragedies involving children, no one connected the dots in time. Let's talk about what people saw, what they heard, what they reported and what they didn't. At school, the teachers at Lily and Jack's school noticed things that concerned them. These weren't casual observations. These were trained educators who work with children every day and know what normal looks like and what doesn't. They saw unexplained bruises on both children, not the typical bumps and scrapes that active kids get from playing on playgrounds or climbing trees. These were bruises that didn't have good explanations. Bruises in locations that raised questions. When teachers would gently ask Lily or Jack how they got hurt, the explanations were vague, inconsistent, the kind of answers that make experienced educators pause and wonder what's really happening at home. But it wasn't just physical marks. It was behavioral changes that were equally concerning, maybe even more so. Lily had been an outgoing, engaged student. She loved participating in class. She raised her hand constantly. She played with other children during recess. She was social, happy, enthusiastic about school, but over a period of several months leading up to May 2025, teachers watched her change. She became withdrawn, quiet. She stopped raising her hand in class. She stopped playing with friends as much during recess. She'd sit by herself, drawing in her notebook, lost in her own world. Teachers recognized this pattern. They'd seen it before in children experiencing trauma or chronic stress at home. Jack showed different warning signs. He became hypervigilant, constantly on alert, constantly scanning his environment like he was waiting for something bad to happen. He'd startle easily at loud noises. He'd become anxious or fearful in situations that shouldn't provoke that kind of reaction. These are classic signs that something is very wrong in a child's home environment. One teacher became concerned enough that she took a significant step. Approximately 3 weeks before Lily and Jack disappeared, she filed a formal report with Child Protective Services. This wasn't a decision she made lightly. Teachers understand the serious implications of filing such reports, but she documented everything she'd observed, specific bruises she'd seen on Jack's arms that looked like someone had grabbed him forcefully. Behavioral changes in both children that worried her professionally. Her clear concern that the children might not be safe at home. She recommended that trained social workers investigate the situation immediately. But the child welfare system overwhelmed, chronically understaffed, drowning in cases across the province, didn't act quickly enough. There was no investigation launched before May 2nd, no social worker visited the home, no one intervened. 3 weeks later, Lily and Jack were gone, at home. The neighbors living near the Sullivan property heard things that, in retrospect, they deeply wish they had reported to authorities at the time. Multiple neighbors told police investigators after the children disappeared, when law enforcement was canvassing the entire area, that they'd heard what sounded like serious arguments coming from the Sullivan property on multiple occasions over several months. Some specifically remembered hearing what sounded like children crying or screaming in distress. One neighbor described hearing a child's voice screaming the word "stop" repeatedly and urgently, followed by sounds that might have been impacts, objects hitting surfaces or walls. These sounds made the neighbors uncomfortable, but like so many people in similar situations, they didn't want to interfere in what they assumed was a private family matter. They convinced themselves it probably wasn't as bad as it sounded. That all families have conflicts, that it wasn't their place to get involved. Now they live with guilt, knowing they had opportunities to potentially save these children's lives, and they didn't act. Inside the home, the stress was overwhelming and constant. Financial pressure permeated everything. Daniel worked sporadically in construction, a few weeks of intensive work, then periods of unemployment. Maleia worked part-time in retail, but her income was minimal. They were supporting 5 people on unpredictable, insufficient income. They were behind on rent. They had mounting debts. Money was a source of frequent, intense arguments between Daniel and Maleia, arguments that neighbors could hear through walls and windows. But investigators discovered something even more disturbing when they analyzed text messages recovered from both Daniel and Maleia's phones. Daniel had sent multiple messages to friends over several months complaining bitterly about Lily and Jack. He expressed significant resentment about having to support and care for children who weren't biologically his. He explicitly referred to them as burdens he never asked for and never wanted. In one particularly chilling message sent just 2 weeks before the children disappeared, Daniel wrote to a friend that life would be so much easier without Lily and Jack complicating everything. Maleia's messages to friends showed she felt completely overwhelmed by caring for 3 children, particularly 2 older children who required more attention, more resources, more patience than Baby Meadow. There were discussions between Daniel and Maleia about feeling trapped, about wishing things were different, about wanting to start over. Reading these messages now, knowing what happened, they take on a sinister tone that investigators have noted extensively in their reports. Daniel's history. Daniel Martel's past reveals a troubling pattern that should have been a massive red flag. Before his relationship with Maleia, Daniel had been involved with another woman who had a young daughter from a previous relationship. That relationship lasted about 2 years. During that time, multiple people who observed Daniel's interactions with the child described him as too rough, too harsh in his discipline methods. He lacked patience. He lacked the gentleness that young children require and deserve. There was a specific documented incident where Daniel grabbed the child forcefully enough to leave visible marks on her arm. A daycare worker noticed the marks and, following mandatory reporting protocols, reported the incident to child welfare authorities. The case was investigated. Social workers interviewed the mother, interviewed Daniel, observed the child, but ultimately, no criminal charges were filed. The investigation concluded, and the case was closed. The relationship between Daniel and that woman ended shortly after this incident, but the pattern was established in official records. This was someone who had a documented history of difficulty controlling his temper around children who weren't biologically his, someone who used excessive force, someone who crossed boundaries that should never be crossed with children. Maleia's history. Maleia Brooks Murray also had a concerning history as a parent. Approximately 2 years before Lily and Jack disappeared, she had temporarily lost custody of both children. This is a significant event that speaks to serious concerns about her parenting. The children were removed from her care by child welfare authorities and placed with Maleia's mother for a period of several months, while Maleia was required to address issues that made authorities question her ability to care for the mother, children, properly. The specific reasons for this loss of custody are sealed in court records, as is typical in child welfare cases, to protect family privacy. But family members indicated in interviews with investigators that concerns were raised about multiple aspects of Maleia's parenting: her ability to meet the children's basic needs, her mental and emotional stability, questions about whether she was providing adequate supervision. She eventually regained custody after completing whatever requirements the court had imposed, possibly counseling, parenting classes, addressing mental health issues, or other interventions. But family members privately expressed doubts about whether she was truly ready to handle the constant demands of parenting two young, energetic children who required consistent attention and care. The pattern: every single adult who could have saved these children, teachers who saw the bruises and behavioral changes, neighbors who heard the screaming, the child welfare system that received reports but didn't act fast enough, had a piece of the puzzle. But no one put it together in time. The system failed Lily and Jack in every possible way, and two children who desperately needed protection didn't get it when they needed it most. And then came May 1st, 2025, the last day anyone outside that house saw Lily and Jack alive. May 1st, 2025, 2:25 p.m. Security cameras at a Dollarama store in Pictou County captured footage that would become critically important to this investigation. Dollarama is a discount retail chain found throughout Canada, the kind of store where families shop for everyday items, household goods, snacks, toys. The footage shows all 5 members of the Sullivan family walking through the store together. Maleia pushes a shopping cart with baby Meadow secured in the seat. Daniel walks alongside her, and Lily and Jack move through the aisles, looking at items on shelves, exhibiting completely normal childhood behavior and curiosity. Investigators have reviewed this footage extensively, frame by frame, multiple times, looking for anything unusual, anything concerning, any sign that something was already wrong. But there's nothing. The children appear healthy, normal, unharmed. They look like any other kids on any other shopping trip with their family on a Thursday afternoon. Lily picks up a package of markers and shows it to Maleia. Jack points at something on a shelf and tugs on Daniel's sleeve. Ordinary moments. Mundane moments. The kind of moments that happen in families every single day across the country. This security footage represents the absolute last time anyone outside the immediate family can verify with certainty and independent documentation that Lily and Jack Sullivan were alive and well. After that shopping trip concluded, the family left the store and drove back to their property in Lansdowne Station. Based on the distance and typical drive time, they would have arrived home sometime around 3 or 4 p.m. And from that point forward, from approximately 3 or 4 p.m. on May 1st until the 911 emergency call at 10:01 a.m. on May 2nd, only 2 people claimed to have seen Lily and Jack alive: Daniel Martel and Maleia Brooks Murray. That's it. No other witnesses, no independent verification, no one who can corroborate their account of what happened during those critical 18 to 19 hours. This creates what investigators call a significant evidentiary gap, a window of time where we have to rely entirely and exclusively on the word of 2 people who are now the primary suspects in the children's disappearance and presumed deaths. 2 people who have every reason to lie about what actually occurred. So what's their story? What do Daniel and Maleia claim happened during those hours? According to the account they've provided to police, to media, to anyone who's asked, and they've maintained this story consistently since the very beginning, the evening of May 1st was completely normal. Routine, unremarkable in every way. They say the children had dinner with the family. Nothing special, just a regular weeknight meal. After dinner, Lily and Jack played for a while, as children typically do in the evening hours. Then they went through their bedtime routine, brushing teeth, changing into pajamas, the usual activities. Daniel and Maleia claim the children went to bed at their normal bedtime, which they say was around 9 or 9:30 p.m. They say they tucked the kids in, said goodnight, and closed the bedroom doors. Then Daniel and Maleia went to bed themselves shortly after, with baby Meadow sleeping in a crib in their bedroom, as was their routine. Nothing unusual, nothing concerning, just another ordinary evening in a family home. The next morning, May 2nd, they claim Lily and Jack woke up at their normal time. The children came downstairs, had breakfast, and then asked if they could go outside to play in the backyard. Daniel and Maleia say they told the children yes, they could play outside. It was part of the regular morning routine. The weather was decent. The kids liked being outdoors, nothing unusual about it. So Lily and Jack went outside to play while Daniel and Maleia remained inside the house with baby Meadow, doing normal morning activities, getting dressed, cleaning up from breakfast, taking care of the baby. They claim they could hear the children playing outside through open windows, sounds that reassured them everything was fine and normal. The sounds of children being children running around, talking to each other, playing whatever games 4-year-olds and 6-year-olds play. But then, according to their account, it went quiet outside. That silence is what made them check on the children, they say. When you have kids playing outside and it suddenly goes quiet, that's when you wonder what they're getting into. That's when you go look. Daniel and Maleia say they went outside to see why it was quiet, and Lily and Jack were nowhere to be found, completely vanished. The back gate, the one that led to the wilderness trails behind the property, was standing open. They claim they searched the immediate area around the house. They called the children's names. They looked in the outbuildings. They checked all the places kids might hide or wander to. Nothing. No sign of them anywhere. That's when they made the decision to call 911. The call came in at exactly 10:01 a.m. on May 2nd, 2025. On that call, which has been released to the public and analyzed extensively, Maleia sounds frantic, panicked. She tells the dispatcher that her children are missing, that they must have wandered through the back gate into the woods, that they need help finding them immediately. The dispatcher asks standard questions. How old are the children? What were they wearing? When did you last see them? How long have they been missing? Maleia provides answers. She sounds like a terrified mother whose children have disappeared. She's crying. Her voice is shaking. She sounds genuinely distressed. And based on that call, a massive search operation was launched. RCMP officers, search and rescue teams, volunteers from the community, helicopters with thermal imaging equipment, search dogs, hundreds of people combing through miles and miles of dense wilderness looking for 2 small children. That search continued for days, then weeks, expanding outward from the property in ever-widening circles, covering terrain that was rough, challenging, dangerous, even for experienced searchers. They never found Lily and Jack. But here's the problem with Daniel and Maleia's story. Here's why investigators don't believe a single word of it. The bathroom evidence proves that Lily was seriously injured on the evening of May 1st. The biological evidence found in multiple locations throughout that bathroom, on the floor, on the tub, on the sink, on the wall 3 feet from the ground, tells us that something significant happened to her that night. The pattern and distribution of that evidence, according to forensic analysts who examined it, suggests trauma serious enough to require immediate medical attention. If Lily was injured that extensively on the evening of May 1st, she could not have been alive and playing outside the next morning. She couldn't have woken up normally, had breakfast, and gone outside to play. The story doesn't work. The timeline doesn't work. The evidence contradicts every single element of their account, and there's more evidence that supports this conclusion. Smart home device data recovered from the Sullivan house shows a spike in noise from the hallway near the children's rooms at approximately 9:45 p.m. on May 1st. This data comes from devices like smart speakers or home assistants that are constantly monitoring for wake words, and in the process, they register ambient noise levels. That spike at 9:45 p.m. suggests something loud happened in that hallway, something that registered as significantly above normal background noise. What was that noise? What caused it? Daniel and Maleia claim the children were peacefully asleep by that time, but the data suggests otherwise. The children's tablets tell another part of the story. Lily and Jack both had tablets they used for games and videos, the kind of screen time that's become standard for kids their age. Those tablets show activity until approximately 7:30 to 8 p.m. on May 1st, games being played, videos being watched, normal evening activity, and then nothing. No activity after 8 p.m. The tablets went dark and stayed dark. If the children were alive and well through the evening and into the next morning, as Daniel and Maleia claim, why did their tablets show no activity after 8 p.m.? Why didn't they use them the next morning before going outside to play? Children that age are attached to their devices. They use them constantly. The sudden cessation of all activity suggests something happened that prevented them from continuing their normal routines. Every piece of evidence, the bathroom forensics, the smart home data, the tablet activity, the timeline points to the same conclusion. Something happened to Lily and Jack on the evening of May 1st. Something that occurred inside that house. something that left biological evidence in the bathroom, something that ended their lives. And everything that came after the 911 call, the frantic search, the media appearances where Daniel and Maleia pleaded for their children's safe return, all of it was an elaborate, carefully constructed lie designed to cover up what really happened. What time is it where you're watching this? Drop it in the comments. And if you think this evidence is as damning as I do, share this video with someone who's been following this case. Now, let's break down the cleanup operation. The bathroom evidence doesn't just tell us what happened to Lily, it tells us something equally important, what Daniel and Maleia did afterward. Because that bathroom didn't clean itself. Those biological traces didn't scrub themselves away, those industrial-strength chemicals didn't pour themselves down the drains. Someone conducted a deliberate, methodical cleanup operation designed to erase evidence of what occurred in that room. And the evidence of that cleanup is almost as damning as the evidence of the incident itself. Let's start with the chemicals. Investigators discovered that Maleia Brooks Murray had purchased industrial-strength cleaning products online in the days before May 2nd. Not on May 2nd, after the children supposedly disappeared. Not in a panic after something unexpected happened, days before. These weren't products you'd find under the average person's kitchen sink. These weren't the standard household cleaners you pick up at the grocery store for wiping down counters or mopping floors. These were specialized, industrial-grade products designed specifically to break down biological material. The kind of products used in medical facilities, crime scene cleanup companies, or industrial settings where powerful cleaning is required. Maleia researched these products. She found them online. She ordered them. She had them delivered to the property. Why would someone order industrial-strength biological cleaning products days before their children supposedly wandered into the woods and disappeared? That question answers itself. When forensic technicians analyzed the drain traps from the bathroom sink and bathtub, they found residues of these exact chemicals, the same products Maleia had ordered online, in concentrations far beyond what you'd ever see from normal household cleaning. We're not talking about someone using diluted cleaner to wipe down a sink or scrub a tub. We're talking about concentrated chemicals poured directly down drains at strengths meant to break down and dissolve biological material. The concentrations detected were consistent with someone pouring the product straight from the bottle, undiluted, in an attempt to flush away evidence. But the chemicals were just one component of the cleanup operation. Forensic analysis revealed that someone had scrubbed biological evidence from multiple surfaces throughout that bathroom: the floor near the bathtub, the side of the tub itself, the bathroom sink, the wall adjacent to the tub. All of these surfaces showed luminol reaction, that blue-green fluorescence that indicates biological material was present. But to the naked eye, these surfaces appeared completely clean, spotless. That level of cleaning doesn't happen by accident. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes deliberate, sustained work to remove biological evidence to the point where it's invisible to the naked eye. Investigators found additional evidence of this scrubbing operation: fibers from cleaning cloths trapped in small crevices and gaps around the sink and bathtub. These are tiny spaces, the kind of places where fibers can become lodged during vigorous cleaning and remain even after the cloths themselves have been removed and disposed of far from the property. Laboratory analysis of these recovered fibers showed they contained traces of Lily's DNA and significant residues of the industrial cleaning chemicals. Someone used cloths saturated with those powerful chemicals to wipe up biological evidence. They scrubbed surfaces thoroughly. They used the chemicals to help break down and remove the material. And then they disposed of those cloths somewhere away from the property where investigators couldn't recover them. But microscopic fibers remained behind, trapped in crevices too small to clean effectively, providing evidence of the cleanup operation and its clear purpose. The drains tell their own story. When forensic technicians removed the drain traps, those curved sections of pipe under sinks and tubs that hold water and trap material, they found biological material containing Lily's DNA that had accumulated in the curves where it couldn't be easily flushed away. They also found those industrial chemical residues at concentrations that indicate someone poured significant amounts of undiluted cleaning products directly into the drains. Why would someone do that? What's the purpose of pouring industrial chemicals down a drain? To flush away biological evidence, to break down material that had gone down that drain, to eliminate traces of what happened. The bathtub drain showed the same pattern: biological material with Lily's DNA. chemical residues at concentrations far beyond normal cleaning use. Someone had used that tub as part of the cleanup, water running, chemicals poured, evidence being washed away, or so they thought. But here's what Daniel and Maleia didn't account for. Modern forensic science is incredibly sophisticated. Biological evidence can be detected even after extensive cleaning. DNA can be recovered from microscopic traces. Chemical residues leave signatures that reveal exactly what products were used and in what concentrations. You can't completely erase what happened, not when forensic specialists know what to look for and have the tools to find it. The ventilation system provided yet another source of preserved evidence that the cleanup operation couldn't reach. The bathroom had a standard exhaust fan mounted in the ceiling, the kind found in virtually all modern bathrooms to remove moisture and odors. That fan vents through metal ductwork that runs through walls and ceiling spaces before exiting outside. During whatever occurred in that bathroom, that fan was likely running, and as it ran, it pulled air through the system, air that contained microscopic particles. Those particles were drawn into the ductwork and deposited on the interior surfaces of the ducts, completely beyond the reach of any cleanup effort because they were inside the ventilation system in areas that can't be accessed without removing sections of ductwork entirely. Forensic technicians made the decision to do exactly that. They removed sections of the ductwork and examined them under controlled laboratory conditions. Inside, they found microscopic particles that had been pulled into the vent system, particles that provided additional scientific confirmation that significant events involving biological material had occurred in that bathroom. This evidence was preserved in a place Daniel and Maleia never thought to clean. Never could have cleaned even if they'd thought of it. And then there's the witness testimony that corroborates the physical evidence. Janie Mackenzie, Daniel's mother, who lived in a separate building on the same property, initially told investigators she went to bed early on the night of May 1st and heard nothing unusual. But under repeated, careful questioning over subsequent months, as investigators pressed her to think carefully and remember every possible detail, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, her memory evolved. She eventually recalled, after extensive prompting by experienced investigators, that she had heard water running from the main house late that evening, significantly later than would be normal for children's bedtime bath routines. She specifically remembered the water running for an extended period, unusually long, far longer than a typical bath or shower would require. At the time, she didn't think anything of it. People use water for many innocent reasons. It didn't strike her as particularly unusual or worth investigating or even worth remembering initially. But in retrospect, with the knowledge of what forensic analysis has revealed, that extended water running takes on significant new meaning. The extended water running could very well have been the cleanup operation in progress. Water being used repeatedly and extensively to rinse biological evidence from multiple surfaces, to flush material down drains, to eliminate all traces of what had occurred. The timeline fits, the physical evidence fits, the witness testimony fits. All of it points to the same conclusion: a deliberate, sustained cleanup operation conducted on the night of May 1st, 2025, designed to erase evidence of what happened to Lily Sullivan in that bathroom. This wasn't panic. This wasn't someone frantically trying to cover up an accident in the immediate aftermath of a tragic moment. This was calculated, premeditated, methodical. The chemicals were purchased days in advance. The cleanup was thorough and extensive. The room was made to look completely normal. The story was constructed and rehearsed. The 911 call was made at a strategic time the next morning to establish a false timeline. Every element suggests planning, consciousness of guilt, deliberate effort to avoid accountability for what occurred. But they made one critical mistake. They thought they could erase Lily completely. They thought if they cleaned thoroughly enough, used powerful enough chemicals, made the room look normal enough, no one would ever know what happened in that bathroom. They couldn't. Based on 7 months of intensive investigation, forensic analysis, digital evidence, witness statements, and timeline reconstruction, investigators have developed a theory of what actually occurred in the Sullivan home on the evening of May 1st, 2025. We can't know every detail with absolute certainty without someone confessing fully and honestly to what happened, but the evidence paints a clear and deeply disturbing picture. According to the timeline established through multiple sources, electronic device data, smart home systems, forensic analysis, and witness statements the incident in the bathroom occurred sometime between 8 and 10 p.m. on May 1st. The children's tablets show their last activity around 7:30 to 8 p.m., suggesting something happened after that time that prevented them from continuing their normal evening routine. Smart home device data shows that spike in noise from the hallway near the children's rooms at approximately 9:45 p.m., significantly above normal background levels. Investigators believe Lily was in the bathroom that evening, possibly for her bedtime bath or bathroom routine. This would have been completely normal. Children that age have established bedtime routines, and bathing is typically part of that routine. Maleia was with her in the bathroom. Daniel was elsewhere in the house, possibly with Jack in another room, or downstairs with baby Meadow. What happened next is where the evidence becomes particularly disturbing. Based on the location and pattern of biological traces revealed through luminol testing, forensic experts believe Lily was injured while in or near the bathtub. The evidence on the wall at a height of 3 feet from the floor suggests an injury occurred while she was standing or being moved near that wall. Blood pattern analysts, specialists with extensive training and experience in interpreting what biological evidence reveals about the events that created it, have examined every detail. They look at factors like the size and shape of traces, the distribution across surfaces, the height at which evidence appears on walls, and many other technical details that help reconstruct what happened. The nature of the specific injury cannot be determined with certainty without recovering Lily's body and conducting an autopsy that would reveal the full extent of trauma. But the amount and distribution of biological evidence suggests significant trauma occurred. This wasn't a minor injury. This wasn't a scraped knee or a bumped head. Forensic analysts who've examined the patterns believe the injuries would have required immediate medical attention, the kind of injury where any responsible adult would immediately call 911, would rush the child to an emergency room, would do everything possible to get help, but no medical help was sought, no call to emergency services, no trip to a hospital or urgent care facility. Instead, Daniel and Maleia made a different choice. They chose to conceal what had occurred. They chose to clean up the evidence. They chose to eliminate any trace of what happened in that bathroom. And that choice tells investigators and prosecutors everything they need to know about consciousness of guilt. Even if an injury occurred accidentally, even if it occurred during discipline that went tragically wrong, the right thing to do, the legal thing to do, the moral thing to do is get immediate medical attention. But they didn't do that. The cleanup operation that followed was extensive and deliberate. The biological evidence was scrubbed from surfaces using the industrial-strength cleaning products that had been purchased days in advance. These weren't products someone happens to have in their home. These were specialized products that Maleia specifically researched and ordered online before May 1st. That fact alone suggests premeditation. It suggests planning. It suggests someone knew they might need powerful cleaning chemicals capable of breaking down biological material. Cleaning chemicals were poured down drains in an attempt to flush away biological evidence. The room was made to look normal and unremarkable, as if nothing unusual had occurred there. This kind of cleanup takes significant time and effort. It's not something you do in a few minutes. It demonstrates planning and consciousness of guilt. But what happened to Jack? The evidence regarding Jack is less clear because no biological evidence belonging to him has been recovered from the bathroom or anywhere else in the house. Investigators have developed theories based on the overall evidence and timeline, but without physical evidence specifically tied to Jack, they're working with less certainty. One theory is that Jack witnessed what happened to Lily, that he was present when his sister was injured, that he saw something no 4-year-old child should ever see, and that made him a liability, a witness who could tell people what happened, a child who might talk to teachers or neighbors or family members about what he saw. Another theory is that Jack was harmed separately, possibly in a different location in the house where cleanup was more straightforward or where biological evidence wasn't deposited in ways that could be detected months later. The smart home device data showing that noise spike at 9:45 p.m. could correspond to either the bathroom incident itself or events involving Jack in another part of the house. Without Jack's remains being recovered and examined, without additional physical evidence being discovered, investigators can't say with certainty exactly what happened to him or in what sequence events occurred. But what they can say with confidence is that both children disappeared on the evening of May 1st, 2025. Not the morning of May 2nd, as Daniel and Maleia claim. The evening before, the bodies have never been recovered, despite extensive searches of the wilderness area behind the Sullivan property. Investigators believe the remains were hidden somewhere in that vast forest. Miles and miles of dense woods, rough terrain, places where even experienced searchers can miss things. Daniel and Maleia had access to that wilderness. They knew the trails. They had time during the night of May 1st and early morning hours of May 2nd, before making that 911 call at 10:01 a.m. to transport the children's bodies into the woods and conceal them. The back gate that they claim was found open when the children supposedly wandered off. That gate likely was used that night, but not by Lily and Jack walking through it on their own. Searches have covered extensive areas, but the wilderness is vast. Remains could be buried. They could be concealed in dense undergrowth. They could be in locations that searchers simply haven't reached yet, despite their best efforts. Finding Lily and Jack's remains is critical not just for bringing closure to extended family members who are desperate to lay these children to rest with dignity, but also for the criminal case. Physical remains would provide additional evidence. An autopsy could reveal the exact nature and extent of injuries. It could provide more details about what happened and potentially about the sequence of events. But even without recovering the remains, prosecutors believe they have sufficient evidence to bring charges and secure convictions. The bathroom evidence alone is powerful. It proves Lily was seriously harmed inside that house. It proves a cleanup operation was conducted. It proves the story Daniel and Maleia told is false. Combined with the digital evidence, the text messages expressing resentment toward the children, the online purchase of industrial cleaning chemicals, the smart home data, the tablet activity cessation, and the witness testimony and the timeline reconstruction, prosecutors have built a case they believe will stand up in court. The consciousness of guilt is overwhelming. The pattern of behavior is clear. The physical evidence is damning. Daniel Martel and Maleia Brooks-Murray had motive. They resented the children, felt burdened by them, wanted to start over without them complicating their lives. They had opportunity 18 hours where only they claimed to have seen the children alive, with no independent witnesses or verification. They had means access to the children, access to the property, access to the wilderness where remains could be hidden, and they demonstrated consciousness of guilt through their actions, purchasing cleaning supplies in advance, conducting an extensive cleanup operation, fabricating a story about the children wandering into the woods, making a strategic 911 call to establish a false timeline. Every element of a prosecutable case is present. Justice is coming for Lily and Jack Sullivan. It's taken 7 months of painstaking investigative work. It's required sophisticated forensic analysis. It's demanded patience and persistence from investigators who refuse to give up. But the evidence is there. The case is being built. And 2 people who thought they could get away with erasing 2 innocent children from existence are about to face the full weight of the criminal justice system. 7 months after Lily and Jack Sullivan disappeared, after thousands of hours of investigative work, after forensic analysis that revealed what was hidden, after witness interviews and digital evidence recovery and timeline reconstruction, the case has reached a critical turning point. The bathroom evidence is game-changing. It's the kind of physical evidence that transforms a missing persons case into a criminal investigation with clear suspects and a clear path toward prosecution. Prosecutors are now confident they can bring charges against Daniel Martel and Maleia Brooks-Murray. Sources close to the investigation indicate that criminal charges are expected soon. Arrests are imminent. So why does this bathroom evidence matter so much? Why is it so significant to the case? First, it proves that harm occurred inside the home, not outside, as Daniel and Maleia have claimed. Their entire story is built on the premise that Lily and Jack woke up on the morning of May 2nd, went outside to play, and wandered through the back gate into the wilderness, where they got lost. But the bathroom evidence destroys that narrative completely. It proves Lily was seriously injured inside that house on the evening of May 1st. It proves she couldn't have been alive and playing outside the next morning. The story is a fabrication, a lie designed to explain the children's disappearance in a way that deflects responsibility away from the 2 adults who were supposed to be protecting them. Second, the bathroom evidence establishes a timeline. The incident occurred on the evening of May 1st, between approximately 8 and 10 p.m. This timeline is supported by multiple sources. The forensic evidence itself, the children's tablet activity cessation around 8 p.m., the smart home device data showing a noise spike at 9:45 p.m., and witness testimony about extended water running late that evening. This timeline directly contradicts Daniel and Maleia's claim that the children were alive and well through the evening and into the next morning. Third, the bathroom evidence demonstrates consciousness of guilt through the extensive cleanup operation. The purchase of industrial cleaning chemicals days before the incident. The thorough scrubbing of biological evidence from multiple surfaces. The pouring of concentrated chemicals down drains. The effort to make the room look completely normal. All of this shows deliberate action to conceal what happened. It shows awareness that what occurred was criminal. It shows intent to avoid accountability. Innocent people don't conduct industrial-grade cleanup operations to erase evidence. Innocent people call 911 when a child is seriously injured. Innocent people seek medical help immediately. Daniel and Maleia did none of those things. Their actions speak louder than any words they've said in interviews or statements to police. Fourth, the bathroom evidence provides powerful physical evidence for trial. Juries respond to physical evidence. They respond to DNA analysis. They respond to forensic experts explaining what biological traces and blood patterns reveal about what happened. This isn't a case built solely on circumstantial evidence or witness testimony that can be challenged or disputed. This is hard science. This is DNA belonging to Lily Sullivan found in multiple locations in that bathroom. This is chemical residues that match products Maleia purchased online. This is forensic analysis conducted by experts using established, reliable scientific methods. Defense attorneys will have an extremely difficult time explaining away this evidence. How do you explain your client purchasing industrial biological cleaning products days before the children disappeared? How do you explain the child's DNA in multiple locations in a bathroom that appeared spotless? How do you explain chemical residues at concentrations indicating a deliberate cleanup operation? You can't. Not in any way that a jury will find credible. So, what comes next in this case? Criminal charges are expected to be filed soon. The exact charges will depend on what prosecutors believe they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, but they likely will be serious, potentially including charges related to causing the deaths of both children and charges related to concealing what happened. Once charges are filed, arrests will follow. Daniel Martel and Maleia Brooks Murray will be taken into custody. They'll be formally charged. They'll appear in court for arraignment where they'll enter pleas. Given the severity of the expected charges, it's likely they'll be held without bail or on very high bail pending trial. Flight risk and danger to the community are factors judges consider, and in a case like this involving the deaths of 2 children, courts typically don't take chances. The trial, when it happens, will likely include testimony from multiple forensic experts. Specialists in DNA analysis will explain how they identified Lily's biological material in the bathroom. Blood pattern analysts will explain what the distribution and location of evidence reveals about what happened. Chemists will testify about the cleaning products and the concentrations found in drain traps. Digital evidence will be presented. Text messages showing resentment toward the children. Online purchase records for the industrial cleaning chemicals. Smart home device data showing the noise spike. Tablet activity logs showing when the children's devices went dark. Witness testimony will be heard. Janie McKenzie will likely testify about hearing extended water running late that night. Teachers will testify about the bruises and behavioral changes they observed. Neighbors will testify about hearing children screaming and adults yelling. Timeline reconstruction will be presented, showing how all the evidence fits together to prove that Lily and Jack didn't disappear on the morning of May 2nd as claimed, but rather something happened to them on the evening of May 1st inside that house. It will be a complex trial. It will likely last weeks, but prosecutors believe they have the evidence to secure convictions. There's still a substantial reward available for information that has investigative value, particularly information that could lead to the recovery of Lily and Jack's remains. The RCMP tip line remains open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. People can call anonymously if they choose. Any information, no matter how small it might seem, could be the piece that helps investigators finally locate where the children's bodies were hidden. Finding those remains is critical for multiple reasons. For the extended family members, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins who are desperate to lay Lily and Jack to rest with dignity and have a place where they can go to remember and mourn. For the criminal case, because physical remains would provide additional evidence and allow for autopsies that could reveal more details about what happened. And for the community, because there's something deeply unsettling about knowing 2 children are out there somewhere in the wilderness, unfound, alone. If anyone watching this has any information about this case, if you know something, if you saw something, if you heard something, please contact the RCMP immediately. You could be the one who helps bring Lily and Jack home. Lily and Jack deserve to be found. They deserve to be laid to rest with dignity and love. They deserve to have their lives remembered and honored. And Daniel Maleia and Maleia Brooks-Murray deserve to face every single consequence of what they've done. Justice has been slow in coming. 7 months of investigation, 7 months of forensic analysis, 7 months of building a case piece by piece. But it's coming. The bathroom evidence has changed everything. It's provided the proof investigators needed. It's given prosecutors the confidence to move forward with charges. 2 people who thought they could erase 2 children from existence, who thought they could clean away the evidence and tell a convincing lie and get away with it, they're about to learn that justice, while sometimes slow, is thorough. And it's coming for them. The Lily and Jack Sullivan case isn't just about 2 children who lost their lives and 2 adults who will face criminal charges. It's about systemic failures that happen over and over again in cases across the country. It's about opportunities to intervene that were missed. It's about people who saw warning signs and didn't act. And it's about lessons we all need to learn if we're going to prevent tragedies like this from happening to other children. Let's talk about the failures. A teacher filed a report with Child Protective Services 3 weeks before Lily and Jack disappeared. She documented specific concerns: unexplained bruises, behavioral changes, signs of trauma. She recommended immediate investigation. But the child welfare system, overwhelmed, chronically understaffed, drowning in cases, didn't act in time. No investigation was launched before May 2nd. No social worker visited the home. No one intervened. 3 weeks later, those children were gone. This is a systemic failure that happens constantly. Child protective services across the country are underfunded and understaffed. Social workers carry caseloads that are far too high to manage effectively. Reports sit in queues waiting for someone to have time to investigate. And children pay the price. Neighbors heard children screaming. They heard a child's voice yelling, "Stop," followed by impact sounds. They heard frequent, intense arguments. They heard things that made them uncomfortable, but they didn't call police. They didn't report what they were hearing. They convinced themselves it wasn't their business, that it probably wasn't as bad as it sounded, that someone else would intervene if it was really serious. No one did. This is another pattern that repeats endlessly. People don't want to get involved. They don't want to make assumptions. They don't want to potentially cause problems for a family if they're wrong about what they're hearing. So they do nothing, and children suffer. Daniel Maleia had a documented history with a previous partner's child. An incident serious enough that a daycare worker filed a report. An investigation was conducted, but no criminal charges were filed. The case was closed. Daniel moved on to his next relationship. And that documented history, that pattern of difficulty controlling his temper around non-biological children, that pattern of using excessive force it was in the system. It was known, but it didn't prevent him from being in a position where he had access to Lily and Jack. Maleia Brooks-Murray had temporarily lost custody of her children 2 years before they disappeared. Serious enough concerns were raised that the children were removed from her care for several months. She eventually regained custody after completing court-mandated requirements. But family members privately doubted whether she was ready to handle the demands of parenting. The system returned those children to her care anyway. Every single one of these represents a point where intervention could have happened, where someone could have stepped in, where the system could have worked the way it's supposed to work to protect vulnerable children, but it didn't. So what can we learn from this tragedy? If you see something, say something. This phrase has become almost cliché, but it's critically important. If you're a teacher and you see unexplained bruises on a child, behavioral changes that concern you, signs of trauma, file a report. Document everything. Be persistent. Follow up if nothing happens. If you're a neighbor and you hear children screaming in distress, hear impact sounds, hear things that make you uncomfortable, call police. Let trained professionals investigate. Don't assume someone else will do it. If you're a family member and you have concerns about how children are being treated, speak up. Report to authorities if necessary. Don't stay silent to avoid family conflict. Don't assume someone else will intervene. Don't convince yourself it's probably fine. Don't talk yourself out of acting on your instincts. The system only works if people use it. Child Protective Services can't investigate situations they don't know about. Police can't respond to incidents that aren't reported. Trust your instincts about children in danger. If something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. Yes, there's a possibility you might be wrong. You might report something and it turns out to be innocent. That's okay. It's better to be wrong and have professionals check it out than to be right and do nothing. The teachers in this case live with regret. They wish they'd done more, pushed harder, been more persistent with their concerns. The neighbors live with guilt. They wish they'd called police when they heard those screaming children. They wish they'd trusted their instincts that something was seriously wrong. Everyone who had a piece of the puzzle wishes they'd put it together sooner, wishes they'd acted more decisively, wishes they'd done something that might have saved Lily and Jack. That guilt is understandable. But guilt doesn't bring those children back. Action does. Justice does. The lesson for all of us is to act when we see warning signs, to report when we have concerns, to be persistent when the system doesn't respond quickly enough, to be the person who makes the call that saves a child's life. Because somewhere right now, there's another child in a situation like Lily and Jack were in. Another child being harmed by the adults who are supposed to protect them. Another child showing warning signs that people are noticing but not acting on. And that child's fate might depend on whether someone